welcome back to my channel and a warm welcome if you are new. My name is Gemma and I have a 20-month-old son called Oscar, and in today's video I'm going to talk all about the importance of independent play. I get a lot of messages from you guys asking how we establish independent play, how you might get your child to engage in independent play. A lot of frustrated parents who are desperate because they just can't get anything done, that their child constantly needs them. So I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to establish independent play and how to make it work for both of you. So before I get into it, I just want to talk about what independent play is. So this is a time when your child is able to engage themselves in play that doesn't require any kind of adult interaction. Now, this isn't about dumping your child in a room and walking off. Nobody wants to be in a situation where they're put somewhere and have that feeling of not being wanted. So to start with, that isn't what independent play is. It's not the shooing of a child, you know, go off and play. This is about establishing a real important aspect of your daily routine. And it is important both for the child and for the adult. So the child needs independent play because it's their time to immerse themselves in their own little world, to investigate and explore and not have somebody there teaching them or telling them what to do, just for them to be learning through whatever they're creating or investigating. And equally, this is an important time for us parents because it's a time that we get to ourselves, that we're able to get things done, whether it's a bit of work or something doing in the kitchen or putting the washing out. All of these things that, you know, you could easily do with your child there probably, but maybe not so easy for some things. But also you just need a little bit of time for yourself in the day, and there's nothing wrong with that. So independent play is going to work for both your child, and technically, you know, it's a birthright for your child to have a bit of time and space and peace to get on by themselves, and it is important for us parents. So before I give you my 5 tips, I do want to say that every day is different. And for myself and Oscar, some days he's much more independent, and then there's other days when he does need a lot more of me time. So he needs me to be closer to him. He wants me to be involved in the activities that he's doing. And so just make sure that you're taking it day by day. And some days, you know, independent play isn't what they want, and they want you to be there. And that's understandable because as humans, we're connected to our caregivers and we want them to be around us. So let's get into my 5 tips on how to establish and make independent play work for you. Okay, so tip 1 is to have a real good think about your environment, making sure that the space that you are anticipating that your child will engage in independent play is a space that is going to really help your child to engage and flourish and be excited to be in. If you're following my channel, you're probably also interested in the Montessori approach, and this is a real good gauge of how to set up your environment to make sure that your child is going to be willing to be in it and engage in independent play. So the environment needs to be clean, it needs to be really organized. If you have nice low shelving so your child can access everything, they're much more willing to engage in independent play because they don't need you. And that's what the main drive to independent play is, that you don't need to be there in order for them to be engaged in something. They don't need you to lift something down, they don't need you to pull something out of a big heavy box. You also need to think about where that space is. It needs to be a space where your child knows where you are. So despite the fact that they might not necessarily be looking at you, they will have an awareness of where you are. And we all know that as parents, that if you try to nip upstairs without them noticing, they very quickly notice that you've gone. So it needs to be a space that you are in earshot or in sight of, so that they can engage and still feel safe, that they know where you are. It might also be important that if you're doing something where you're sat down, if you're reading a book or if you're doing some work on a computer, that it's in sight line, because if you've gone quiet, they might break their concentration to think, where have you gone? And they can't hear you and they can't see you. So being within sight shot will help your child to continue to be engaged in independent play. You also need to think of making sure that the space is child-proof. So if you don't have a dedicated playroom, which I know is a luxury, and your child is playing in a different space in the house, then it needs to be a space where you know that you're not going to have to intervene to make sure that they are safe. So the minute that you have to step into that space, it breaks the concentration and the flow of independent play. My second tip would be to have a good look at the toys that you're providing for your child. So have a look at your toys and make sure that they are passive toys. Magda Gerber famously said that active toys make passive babies and passive toys make active babies. And what she meant is that those toys that are advertised as being entertaining and that you feel that you're going to be able to put in front of your child and that's going to give you those 10 minutes peace to empty the dishwasher, it actually does the complete opposite. It trains your child to think that toys have to act for them, and when it stops doing that, they're at a loss. We want passive toys that involve your child having to do and manipulate them in order for them to come alive and to create. So things like loose parts like rocks and pine cones and sticks and shells. Things like simple wooden rings or a Grimm's rainbow. Simple vehicles or a doll, train track. A simple set of blocks are going to be much more engaging for a child. As much as they might look like they're not so engaging, they're going to require a lot more of your child's creativity and imagination for them to be something. And that's what we're aiming for in independent play. We want our children to think creatively. We want them to problem solve. We want them to use their imagination. We don't want toys that are doing everything for them, because it's just going to make them passive learners. We want our children to be active learners, seeking out learning opportunities for themselves. And that really comes into play with our toys. My third tip is to take a look at your role. So, as I said at the beginning, independent play isn't about dumping your child in a room and telling them to play or shooing them off and saying it's time to play now. It is a process that you're going to need to take with your child. You might need to go into the room and begin to play with them, and then at a time when you feel that they're engaged, then take a step back. And more as you do this, you won't need to step into the room. It will just become part of your day. When you are engaging in play with your child, it's so important to take the backseat role and not enforce your child to take that kind of assistant position while you lead the play. If you do that, that's when your child will constantly need you to do that more. So if every time that you play together, you are leading the play, you are creating the game, you are pulling out the items to play with, when we take a step back and expect our child to do independent play, what are they going to think? They've never had that opportunity to lead the play. And so it's so important that when you do engage in play with your child, that you take the assistant role and let them lead the play. There is no wrong way to play with a toy. And so when we try and put our assumptions onto what should be played with or how it should be played with, we're robbing our children of learning how to play independently. Another point to note about our interactions with our child is to avoid trying to constantly teach or demonstrate or show our children different things. It can be a difficult world that we live in where we feel that we are obligated to constantly teach our children, to make sure that they're improving, to make sure they're learning. But actually, they are learning and they have a natural desire to do that. It is inbuilt in us humans to want to further ourselves, to learn new things, to be curious. But it can very easily and quickly be knocked out of children by over-teaching them. I just want to read out this quote, and I want to get it word for word because it is so important. Piaget said, "Each time one prematurely teaches a child something that they would have discovered himself, the child is kept from inventing it and consequently from understanding it completely." And I have seen this again and again as being a teacher. As my role as a teacher, it was to teach children. But if you prematurely teach something to a child that they would have discovered on their own, they lose ownership over that learning and it doesn't stick. You know for yourself that you learn best when you discover it, when you do it yourself. and not always when somebody tells you how to do it or what to do or what to think. We can put things in their path that are going to support them, so we can observe what schema they're in and put items in their play space that is going to allow them to learn, but we don't need to physically bring it to them and show them how to do it. So if you notice your child's in a containment schema, you can put out different containers and loose parts for them in their space so that they're going to be able to have the opportunity to play with them. But you don't need to show them how to do it. You don't need to give them the container and say, look, we can put the coins into the slot, because they might need to do that by themselves to actually absorb that information and learn from it. They might also not want to do that with those items. They might want to tip it upside down and play it as a drum. But there's nothing wrong with that. So we need to try to, as much as possible, let our children lead their own learning. The next point I want to mention is the role of praise in play. And it is something that probably comes naturally to us. We want to say good job and well done to our children when they complete something that we feel that they should have pride in. But actually, by making these comments and continually narrating the pride that we feel that they should feel, we actually take away from the pride that they naturally feel. If you take a step back when your child is doing a puzzle and don't react when they get the piece in, does it change the fact that they are going to continue to do that puzzle? Look at their face, look at their concentration. They are actually getting satisfaction and pride from doing the activity they're doing without needing you to constantly praise them. Can you imagine doing your work and somebody continually praising every item that you did correctly? Even something simple as putting the washing in the machine. Well done, you managed to open the door. Oh, wow, you put all of those clothes in. Fantastic job, you managed to close the door with all of those clothes in. Can you see how frustrating it would be? As well as interrupting your flow of whatever it is that you're doing. It's very easy to see that when a child is constantly praised, they struggle to engage in independent play because they need that adult. They've learned that when they do something, they need an adult to tell them that they've done it well. So we need to take a step back. I know I keep saying this, but our role in play is to take that back seat. We don't need to constantly praise our children. The final point I want to mention about our role in play is trying to avoid making corrections. And this can be difficult because our children are learning and they make lots of mistakes. We make lots of mistakes as adults. And you probably know yourself, if you make a mistake and it is picked up as quick as a flash that you've made that mistake, you don't want to do it anymore. It puts you back a step that you have made a mistake and that something is wrong about what you're doing. And in play, nothing is wrong. As long as our children are in a safe place where they can't come to harm's way, they can't be doing anything wrong. They might not fit their puzzle piece into their puzzle. They might not fit that shape into the shape sorter. But that's all a process of learning. It is not doing it wrong. It's just experiencing it in a way that we might not do because we've learnt our younger years. We've gone through that process. So I just want to reiterate that in play, our role needs to be passive. It needs to be the back seat. Our child is the director of the show and the star of the show, and we are merely the audience. Finally, I just want to say that there is a defining line between being a passive participant in play and being disconnected. It's important that you do participate in the play with your child if you are in the room or they come and show you something, because that's natural for them to want to involve you or to engage you in something. But it's not about saying, no, I'm doing this and I'm not paying attention to you, because that also hinders their ability to play independently because they feel that they're being ignored. So there is that fine line, and just make sure that you are participating and being engaged with them, but also taking a assistant role in the play. My fourth point is a very short point, but it is really essential that I find in Oscar engaging in independent play, is to have silence. And I mentioned this in a video a few weeks ago, and I got lots of people asking me about the importance of silence, and did music or having a podcast or having a conversation all impact the same as having the TV on, which is the thing that I mentioned, background noise of a TV. And it does have an impact on your child's ability to play and have a flow that is uninterrupted. So as important as it is, we understand we need to make noise. We need to have that phone call. We need to have some adult interaction. We need to have the radio on, but you don't need to have it all the time. So have peaceful moments. If you notice that your child is having some time that they are peacefully engaged in play, turn the radio off. Try to put that conversation on the phone back half an hour and allow them to play uninterrupted. I'm sure we can all remember a time when we were maybe writing an essay for school or college or university. And if you just imagine somebody, walking in constantly as you're writing and disrupting your flow, just because it's not writing that they're doing, it's still work, they're still engaged in learning. And so we want to do everything we possibly can to stop that being interrupted. And background noise can often create problems with independent play. If you are somebody that enjoys having music on during the day, there is music that can actually help engagement, and you probably know this from study time, that classical music or jazz music can actually support and encourage our concentration. So I'm not saying, have a completely sound-free house all the time, but do factor in times when your house is a peaceful and tranquil environment. And my final tip is to factor in parts of your day when you want independent play to happen and have it as part of your daily routine. So I know that Oscar absolutely 100% needs to engage in independent play every single day. If I jam-pack our schedule with too much in a day, he is completely overwhelmed. Independent play gives him time to enter into his own world and do as he pleases. And so it is important for me not to fill our days with being in the car or going to this class or that class or seeing these people, and that we have time when we are just at home and he has time to engage in independent play. I find personally that Oscar is much more likely to do that when he has eaten and he is slept well and he is clean. And so first thing in the morning when we come downstairs, he is very unlikely to engage in independent play. He'll be very closely attached to me, waiting for his breakfast to be made, which he does with me. And after that time, he is much more willing to go off into his playroom and engage independently in some play. So when we're thinking about routine, just think about times in your day when you can set aside time that is going to be for your child to engage independently and use their imagination and creativity to just be themselves and create the world that they want. It might be that little time after dinner before bath time. It might be that time after they wake up from their nap. It might be the time before they go for their nap. You know your child best. You know when they are going to need you more, and our children are different from day to day generally, but there is times that are predictable. I know when Oscar has just woken up that he's going to need me the most, and once he's fed and everything else is done, he is much more willing to go off independently. So that is the end of this week's video. I hope my 5 tips have been helpful and practical and will help you to establish times for independent play in your day. Again, I think YouTube is still blocking my comments, so head over to Instagram if you'd like to send me a message, and I'm really happy to help you guys out or answer any of your questions. And I'll see you again next week. Bye.